Deep into Charles Dickens's Great Expectations. And don't worry, if you haven't grabbed a copy yet, there's a link down in the episode description. Sometimes those classics can feel a little bit daunting, but trust me, this one's worth it. I was actually blown away by how much richer it felt on a second read.
Well, Dickens was a master storyteller, and Great Expectations is really a prime example of his skill. It's a coming-of-age tale that follows Pip's journey, but it's so much more than that. It's about ambition, societal pressures, and really what it means to be a true gentleman.
Yeah, and something that you actually highlighted in your notes that I found really fascinating was, right from the first page, Dickens kind of sets the stage for all these themes. I mean, we meet Pip, this orphan, who builds this whole image of his parents just based on their tombstones. It's like he's creating these great expectations for who they were based on literally nothing.
Well, what's so fascinating about that is how that one simple detail kind of foreshadows so much of Pip's later struggles. He's constantly seeking validation from these external sources, whether it's Estella's affection, Miss Havisham's approval, or just the allure of wealth and status. He's building his identity on these really shaky foundations, just like he did with his parents.
It really makes you wonder, have you ever found yourself doing something similar, just kind of holding on to an idea or an expectation, even when it wasn't really serving you?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a universal human experience. We all crave belonging, recognition, maybe even a little bit of grandeur. But Dickens really challenges us to examine where those desires come from and whether they're truly leading us towards, genuine fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you also pointed out a technique that Dickens uses to kind of bring all of this to life, and that's this recurring motif of mist. Early on, Pip's world is literally shrouded in mist, which, symbolizes this limited perspective.
Exactly. It's like this visual representation of his naivete. He's stumbling around both literally and figuratively without this clear sense of purpose. And as his ambitions begin to take shape, the mist gradually lifts. And that mirrors his growing awareness of the world, but also perhaps this, growing disconnect from his true self.
And that transformation is honestly heartbreaking to watch. He goes from this sweet, innocent boy who loves a simple life with Joe to this young man who is just consumed by shame and social climbing.
Right. And while it's easy to judge Pip for his behavior, Dickens encourages us to look a little bit deeper. You remember that passage you underlined where Pip first encounters Miss Havisham's decaying mansion? Saddest house. He's both repelled and mesmerized by it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember writing in my notes that Saddest House felt like this physical manifestation of Miss Havisham's broken heart, like those stopped clocks, the withered wedding dress. It's all so symbolic of her inability to move on.
Exactly. And you'll notice that Dickens actually uses a technique here called juxtaposition. He places this opulent but decaying world of Saddest House in direct contrast to the warmth and simplicity of Joe's forge. It's almost as if he's presenting Pip and us as readers with these two distinct paths.
And it's not just about the physical spaces, right? You highlighted how the characters who inhabit these spaces also embody these opposing forces. You've got Joe with his rough hands and genuine heart versus someone like Drummle who has all the wealth and status but is utterly repulsive in his behavior.
Precisely. It raises the question, what does it truly mean to be a gentleman? Is it about just outward appearances and social standing, or is it about inner character, kindness and integrity?
If you're enjoying this deep dive into Great Expectations, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It really helps us out now getting back to those characters.
Well, the character of Miss Havisham is particularly intriguing. You mentioned her decaying wedding dress. What struck you about that image?
Well, for me, it represented this idea of just clinging to the past. She's literally frozen in time, trapped by her bitterness and heartbreak. It's like this cautionary tale about what happens when we let our past define us.
And that's precisely the danger that Dickens highlights. Miss Havisham's inability to move on poisons, not only her own life, but also Estella's. She molds Estella into this weapon of revenge, incapable of genuine love and connection.
It's almost like this cycle of toxicity. And speaking of toxic characters, we can't forget about Jaggers, the enigmatic lawyer. I mean, his office with that coffin-like chair and the greasy shoulder marks from, desperate clients. It sends chills down my spine. What do you make of him?
Well, Jaggers embodies a different kind of trap. He's this master manipulator. He's seeing through the shallow aspirations of his clients, almost as if he's this puppet master pulling the strings of their fate.
And it's interesting how you connected this to a broader point in your notes. You mentioned that Jaggers kind of represents this fleeting nature of our great expectations against the backdrop of eternity.
Yes. It makes you ponder, doesn't it? Are our ambitions, our desires truly meaningful in the grand scheme of things, or are they just these fleeting moments against this vast canvas of time?
It's a heavy thought, but it's definitely one that Dickens wants us to grapple with. And he doesn't let us forget about those harsh realities of life outside of these grand ambitions. You marked the scene where Pip visits Smithfield, the meat market. What stood out to you there?
Oh yeah, that juxtaposition of that gritty meat market right up against the grandeur of St. Paul's Cathedral.
Mm,
It's so powerful. It's like Dickens is holding up this mirror to society, showing us that stark contrast between aspiration and reality. He doesn't let Pip or us as readers get lost in this fantasy of upward mobility without acknowledging that grime and struggle that often comes with it.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that even in the midst of chasing our dreams, real life with all its complexities continues all around us. And, you also highlighted a passage that connects back to this idea. The moment when one of Pip's mentors stresses that, true gentlemanly behavior can't be faked.
Oh, yes. That's such a pivotal point in Pip's journey. It challenges the very definition of what it means to be a gentleman. It's not about wealth or social status or even education. It's about inner character, about integrity, about how you treat other people.
And that really makes me think about, all the different characters in the book and how they measure up to that definition. We've talked about Joe, who clearly embodies those values,
Yeah.
but you also had a note next to the character of Herbert Pocket. What struck you about him?
Well, Herbert's really fascinating because he represents this more nuanced approach to social standing. He comes from a good family, but he's not afraid to work hard and build his own way.
Wow.
He's kind, he's supportive, and he genuinely wants the best for Pip, even when Pip is lost in his own delusions of grandeur.
Yeah, he's a true friend through thick and thin, and I think his friendship with Pip, really highlights the importance of surrounding yourself with people who lift you up, who see your potential, and who really challenge you to be your best self. It's a reminder that true success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about the relationships that we build and the impact that we have on others.
Speaking of impact, I'm curious about your reaction to the revelation of Pip's benefactor. You circled that part in your notes. What were your thoughts?
Honestly, I was floored. I mean, I knew it was coming, having read the book before, but this time around, I was just struck by how this single event just completely shatters Pip's world. Everything he thought he knew, everything he built his aspirations upon, it just crumbles before him. It's like this huge wake-up call, forcing him to confront the consequences of his choices.
Yeah, it's a powerful moment of reckoning, isn't
Silly
it? It strips away all the pretense and really forces Pip to confront the
Thanks.
truth about himself and the people he's hurt along the way.
And it's in that moment of vulnerability, that stripping away of illusions, that I think true growth begins. He starts to see the value in the simple things, the genuine connections that he had taken for granted, the love and support that was always there.
It's almost as if that literal mist that clouded his vision early on has lifted on this metaphorical level. He can finally see clearly,
Yeah.
with the distortions of his great expectations.
If you're finding these insights helpful, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps other book lovers like you find our deep dives.
Now, you mentioned that you found the ending of Great Expectations to be hopeful. What specifically resonated with you?
Well, for me, it's the sense of peace and possibility. It's not necessarily a fairy tale ending, but it feels realistic and earned. Pip has gone through the fire, failed his demons, and come out the other side, a better person. He's let go of his need for external validation and is building a life based on, genuine values.
And what about Estella? Her journey is perhaps even more complex.
Mm-mm.
She's been so deeply damaged by Miss Havisham's manipulations, raised to be cold and incapable of love. Do you think she finds redemption?
Well, it's open to interpretation, which I love. Dickens doesn't give us a definitive answer, but there are hints of change, of a softening in her final encounter with Pip.
Yeah.
She acknowledges the pain that she's caused and seems to be genuinely remorseful.
It's a glimmer of hope, suggesting that even those who have been hurt and hardened by life can find their way back to love and connection.
And that's what makes this book so enduring. It explores those complexities of the human experience, the aspirations, the disappointments, the growth, the potential for redemption. It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and shaping our own narratives.
And sometimes letting go of our great expectations is the key to finding true fulfillment.
It's interesting how Dickens uses this idea of imprisonment throughout the novel. And it's not just literal imprisonment like Newgate Prison, but also the ways in which, the characters create prisons for themselves.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is how those metaphorical prisons kind of connect back to that theme of expectations. Miss Havisham was imprisoned by her past. She just refuses to let go of her bitterness. Estella's imprisoned by her upbringing. She's unable to form these genuine connections. And Pip, for a time, is imprisoned by his own ambition, sacrificing his integrity for something that ultimately proves hollow.
Yeah, it's like they're all trapped by these expectations, whether they're self-imposed or imposed by others. And it's only through letting go, through breaking free from those expectations, that they can find this sense of liberation.
Right. And that liberation isn't just about, individual growth. Dickens also kind of points a finger at those societal structures that contribute to these prisons. Remember, you underlined that passage about those stark class disparities in London. What struck you about that?
The way Dickens portrays poverty, the way it traps individuals in this cycle of despair, it's incredibly powerful. He doesn't shy away from showing those harsh realities of life for those who are struggling to survive.
Yeah. And on the flip side, he shows how wealth can lead to its own kind of prison.
Mm.
Look at Miss Havisham, isolated in her decaying mansion, surrounded by all these material possessions, but utterly devoid of genuine connection.
Yeah, it's like he's suggesting that true fulfillment isn't found in chasing external validation, whether it's wealth status or even love. It's about something deeper, something more intrinsic.
And it's about recognizing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their social standing. Remember that scene you highlighted where Pip is so ashamed of Joe's rough appearance, in front of his fancy London friends? It's his moment of moral reckoning for Pip.
Absolutely. He realizes that he's bought into this whole system of judgment and prejudice, and he's ashamed of himself for looking down on the one person who has always loved him unconditionally.
Right. It's a powerful lesson in humility and the importance of staying true to your values, even when faced with all these societal pressures.
And that message feels so relevant even today, doesn't it? I mean, we're still grappling with these issues of social mobility, economic disparity, the pursuit of status over substance. But look, Dickens was writing for our time, even though he lived centuries ago.
Yeah, Great Expectations serves as this timeless reminder that those societal issues are really intertwined with our own, individual aspirations and expectations. It challenges us to question the systems that perpetuate inequality and to really strive for a more just and compassionate world.
And on a personal level, it encourages us to examine our own great expectations. Are we chasing after those fleeting desires, or are we pursuing something truly meaningful, something that aligns with our values and brings us genuine fulfillment?
It's a question worth pondering, and it's a testament to Dickens' genius that he can weave such profound social and psychological themes into a story that is both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Great Expectations is a true masterpiece, and honestly, we've only scratched the surface of its richness. I hope this deep dive has inspired you to pick up a copy or revisit this literary treasure if you haven't already.
There's always something new to discover in Dickens' words.
And remember, if you enjoyed this deep dive into Great Expectations, be sure to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast and leave us a review. We love hearing from fellow bookworms.
Yeah, it really helps other people discover the podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Book Nook podcast. Don't forget to check the episode description for a link to purchase your own copy of Great Expectations. Happy reading.